Okay, Mrs. Fryer, I think we're good to go.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to today's meeting of the Children and Families Overview and Scrutiny Committee. As usual, this meeting is being broadcast live via the County Council's website, and it will also be available for viewing after the meeting. Due to the current situation, this meeting is taking place virtually with members of the committee along with officers presenting reports and joining online. Can I please ask all members and officers to have their microphones mute until they wish or are invited to speak? When you are speaking, please turn your video on. Can I now ask members to introduce themselves? I have received apologies from Mr. Osborne. Mr. Bentley is substituting for him. Canon Carolyn Lewis, and I've also had an apology from Dr. Paul Bremner. Now I'm going to just ask everybody to introduce themselves. Mrs. Wright.
Thank you. Good morning, Madam Chair. Councillor Maggie Wright, representing the Stony Stanton and Croft Division.
Thank you. Mr. Parton.
Good morning, Councillor Ted Parton, Loughborough South Division.
Thank you. Mr. Bentley.
Excuse me. Yeah, thank you, Chair. Councillor Ian Bentley, representing the Burstall Division.
Mr. Kaufman.
Yes, I can hear you, Chairman. Geoffrey Kaufman, one of the two county councillors representing Oadby.
Mr. Welsh.
I think we're still waiting for Mr. Welsh to rejoin us.
Okay, we'll go back. Mr. Sheehan.
Hello there, Sean Sheehan, Forest and Measham Division.
Thank you. And I'm Hilary Fryer, the chairman of this committee, and I represent Barrow and Quorn Division. Right, we'll move on to item 1, which is the minutes of the meeting held on the 1st of September, page 5 and 14 in on your agenda. I propose that the minutes of the meeting held on the 1st of September are taken as read, confirmed and signed. Is everybody in agreement? If you could, I see the hands raised. Yes. Thank you very much. Item 2 is question time. I've received no questions from members of the public. Item 3 is questions asked by members under Standing Order 7.3 and 7.5. I have received no questions from members. To item 4, to advise of any other items which the chairman has decided to take as urgent or elsewhere on the agenda. I've not received been notified of any urgent items. Number 5, declarations of interest in respect of the agenda items today. Does any member have any interest they wish to declare? I see no hands up. Thank you. Declarations of the party whip in accordance with Overview and Scrutiny Procedure Rule 16. Do members have any declarations? No, thank you. Item 7, presentation of petitions under Standing Order 36. There are no petitions. Thank you. So, we now move on to the full agenda items. And can I ask that with all the items, members allow officers to present their full report before asking questions. To indicate that you have a question, please unmute your microphone and I will call upon you one at a time. To be sure that everyone has their say, I will finalise by calling on all members to ask if you have anything further to add. Could you please use the raise hand signal if possible? And then it normally comes out in order and I can see it on my screen, the people who want to speak. The first item on today's agenda is the report on the Defining Children and Family Services for the Future. This is on page 15, starts on page 15 of your agenda. This provides an overview of the outcome of a diagnostic assessment of the department and an outline of the plans to take forward work to develop the department. Miss Jane Moore, Director of Children and Families and Services, will present this item. So could I ask Jane to take over now, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Good morning, everybody. So yes, this report is to give members an overview of the outcome of the assessment of the department, but also to set out the plans that we are proposing going forward. So just by way of background, the diagnostic analysis that was undertaken in a context of an already efficient organisation with a good track record in delivering transformational change and savings. And in the context that there's already a very clear vision for children and family services with a set of activities and strategies already in progress to deliver this vision. We've already got a range of efficiencies and savings for some of those activities within the MTFS and already profiled and assumed to be delivered as part of that. So the assessment team that undertook the diagnosis were received really positively by staff and managers across the service, as well as across the council's corporate departments. And the approach of the assessment team was one of partnership and collaboration, so very much working alongside staff within the department and indeed leaders in the department. And the outputs and findings of the diagnostic have been reviewed, they've been validated in order to provide us with an evidence-based and very realistic view of what opportunities could be pursued that extend beyond the plans that we've already got in place. So members will be aware that the Children and Family Services Department faces very significant challenges as a result of increased growth and demand on our services. And this is reflected in the growth that was approved within the MTFS by the County Council in February 2020. And alongside that, Leicestershire County Council is also facing additional financial pressures on top of the MTFS as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. And this has increased the challenge in children and family services of ensuring that we can continue to deliver effective outcomes for children in a financially sustainable way. So it's proposed that the diagnostic assessment helps us to inform what steps we need to take in the ongoing development of the department so that we can make sure that the right interventions are delivered in the right way and at the right time to make sure that children, young people and their families continue to achieve the best possible outcomes whilst ensuring that the services and it are financially sustainable going forward. So the diagnostic assessment identified a number of areas for consideration. The opportunities are focused on maximising improvements that can be made to how the department delivers its services, to support the department to achieve and sustain a high level of performance across all of our pathways for children, and also to provide expertise and knowledge transfer that could be applied beyond the department to other transformational work in the County Council. So broadly, the opportunities that have been identified are categorised into four main themes. So the first theme is around children's pathways, where we want to ensure a greater focus on earlier intervention, preventing escalation, and as I said, ensuring that children receive the right support at the right time through the right service. The second theme is around timeliness of intervention, so ensuring that our interventions are delivered in a timely way as part of a child and young person's journey in order to make sure that we can continue to meet needs. And then the third opportunity is around settings, so really looking at whether children are placed in the most appropriate setting for their level of need and looking at what we need to develop to ensure that that continues. And then the final theme is around the support for our children with disabilities and ensuring that children and young people with disabilities are supported to achieve greater levels of independence and indeed get the support that they require. So the opportunities that have been identified are a combination of a number of things. So they're a combination of potential service user benefits in terms of enhanced quality and outcomes for children. They're also around improved productivity and process, and also a significant savings contribution as well. So over the next 5 to 6 months, it's proposed that further work will be undertaken to develop these themes and opportunities and work through what services need to look like going forward in partnership with staff across the department at all levels, officers from the Transformation Unit, and also our colleagues within Newton Europe. So I'll leave it there now, Chair, to offer questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jane. Right, we'll move on to questions. And after that, there's just another small statement. So I have one person at the moment, Mr. Parton.
Thank you very much, Chair and Jane. I was looking at Newton Europe's website. It was very interesting. And if one clicks on the children's and families section, they talk about case review workshops with practitioners across multiple authorities. And on this page, they give some quite startling improvement statistics. So, for example, they talk about reduced child in need and child protection caseload numbers by 29%, reduced adolescents in care by 23%, increased in-house fostering capacity by 28%, and increased closure without step up in early help by 5%. So these are presumably, well, it doesn't say, but could these be the averages that they've seen? But even if it's not average, if it's maybe they've just picked their best figures they've seen through the work they've done with authorities, to what extent will we see those types of numbers? How achievable is it to see those types of statistics in Leicestershire?
Yes, thank you. So just first of all, around the case review workshops, part of the diagnostic, Newton colleagues did work with us and hold a series of case review workshops. In fact, they met with about 150 of our staff, where they really looked in detail at the work that we already do with our staff collectively and identified a number of opportunities for doing things differently. So that kind of case review workshop methodology is one that they did use with us, and indeed was hugely successful engaging staff in talking about their cases and certainly the successes they'd had. In relation to the kind of figures on the Newton Europe website, they'll be in relation to previous pieces of work that they've done in other authorities. So what we know about Newton is two things. One is that they are a partner that have been secured through a competitive delivery process. So we worked with them to secure them, and that they have in-depth experience of working with other authorities and indeed children's services, and as members will be aware, our own adult services here. So they've got a wealth of experience of working alongside organisations to seek change. The other bit about Newton is that they are a kind of public services organisation who support public services to develop. So some of the figures that you're quoting around some of the outcomes they've seen will be the work that they've achieved in other organisations. What we're really clear about in Leicestershire is that rather than it being a kind of lift and drop from other organisations or indeed other county councils, Newton colleagues will be working really closely with us to work out what will work for Leicestershire and indeed our Leicestershire children. So it could be, in part the work we're looking at is whether or not we can make sure that children don't escalate through the system. So as you say, move from child in need to child protection, or that we can work more successfully at early help to ensure that they don't progress. So part of what we're looking at is similar to what they've done in other places where they've been able to make sure that interventions are most as effective as they possibly can, which means children don't escalate. And so in answer to your last question around to what extent will we see these numbers, I'm really optimistic that we will be able to work with Newton and indeed our staff within the organisation to make sure that children don't move through the system and indeed can get the services they require at the right time.
Thank you. Mr. Sheehan.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. This talk of a diagnostic exercise makes me think of something slightly clinical or sterile. It's a strange sort of concept. And I just wonder where the idea to carry out this exercise came from, and when is Scrutiny going to be able to scrutinise its proposals?
So I agree. I think it's a really interesting term, Mr. Sheehan, and does conjure up other thoughts. I think the really important point is that the diagnostic period is about really getting underneath and understanding what we do, why we do it, and how we do it. So it's a very set process that you and colleagues have worked with us around. Rather than jumping to solutions or jumping to conclusions, we've really looked in detail at the numbers we're working with, what we do, what's been successful, and where we haven't been as successful, and allowed staff to really talk about the work that they do, rather than jumping to a kind of solution in terms of what we need to do. And what that process has enabled us to do is to really understand what we're doing well and what we need to improve on. So in terms of the outcome of the diagnostic, what I've presented to you here is the kind of broad areas that they've identified with us that we think we could improve on. The next period of work is called a design phase, where we'll be working really closely with staff across the department to look at all those areas that we know we're doing really well or we know we can do better at, to come up with a more kind of comprehensive plan for delivery. And at that point, that's when we'll be able to come back to overview and scrutiny and present the kind of full outcomes of the certainly the diagnostic period, and indeed some of our initial thinking around what things need to look like in the future.
So, Chair, if I may, when will that happen? About what, 3 months, 4 months, 6 months? How long?
I'd like to be bringing a report back in January, overview and scrutiny. Okay. One of the things that actually I didn't include in the paper but would like to say is that this is obviously a really major piece of work for the department, and we would want overview and scrutiny to be as involved as possible in this. So I anticipate this being on the agenda probably for the forthcoming year or next year.
That's reassuring. And my first question was, where did the idea come from to bring these people in? Whose baby is it?
So a couple of things really. We went through a competitive tender process in order to secure a partner to work with, and Newton were the successful party in that process. In terms of the idea to bring somebody in to work with us, we know in the department that we have got a significant financial challenge, alongside the fact that we, have just had our Ofsted inspection. We know where we're doing well. Ofsted praised our leadership. They indeed praised a lot of our frontline staff in terms of their delivery. But actually, what we know is that we need somebody to work alongside us in order to help us to think about different ways of working, explore where we're doing well, and really make some robust plans to move forward. And so the idea of bringing a partner in was purely around how we can really set about working towards that financial challenge, and indeed demand challenge that we've got, and then in order to continue to deliver those really positive services for children and families.
Okay.
So would you say it's, just final question, would you say it's motivated by the need to make savings then?
I think it's motivated by two things. So I think the financial challenge is big. I think we are in a position where we can't not acknowledge the financial challenge that we were all in within local authorities. But actually, it's also motivated by the fact that we are absolutely passionate about making sure that our services continue to deliver the best for children. And within a really tightening financial climate, we need to be really honestly looking at how we can continue to have that really strong focus on positive outcomes for children. The main focus of this work is about children. At the heart of this work, it is about how do we ensure that we are delivering best outcomes for children. And that's been the key driver for this work, alongside then how do we do that in the most cost-effective way.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Kaufman.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning. My question's almost just been answered by the final question from Mr. Sheehan. I've read this, and normally the reports that come from the children's departments, children and families, have been very readable. Some of this I've found very difficult as a layperson to understand. And if I go to, on page 18 of the report 17, I wasn't sure, and I'm still not sure, whether the motivation for this was to save money or the motivation for this was actually to improve the services for children. And that the paragraph on 17 doesn't really help me. It's a little bit in jargon. But I think there's more. We all want to improve the services for children, but I think there's more of this on a financial saving from reading that, unless I'm completely wrong, than there is for improvement in children's services. So I was a bit concerned about some of the jargon in 17, but I think my question's just been answered. I don't know whether Jane wants to.
Yeah, I mean, apologies for that, Mr. Kaufman. I think what we're trying to articulate in paragraph 17 is that it's about everything. I mean, just to be absolutely clear for members, we will not undertake work that doesn't improve outcomes for children. We are a Children and Family Services department. Our whole aim is about improving outcomes for children and families across Leicestershire. But we are, as I said, we need to be really honest about the fact that we're working in a climate where finances are really stretched, our demand is increasing. If I had all the money in the world, I would be able to continue to deliver services and more. But the reality is we don't. And the reality is that the numbers of children coming into the Department for Support are increasing. So just to be, really clear, at the heart of this programme is our children, and that the heart of the programme is around how we can continue to deliver the amazing services that we're already delivering for our children, and indeed improve those services. But it is in the context of that tightening financial climate.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Jane.
Mrs. Fryer, I think you're on mute.
Yeah, because my daughter was trying to get hold of me. Thank you, Jane. Thank you, Gemma. We now move on to Mr. Welsh. And then I have Mrs. Taylor and Mr. Parton again. So we move to Mr. Welsh.
Thank you, Chair. I don't know if I'm missing something, but this reference that Councillor Parton made to this, obviously, consultancy firm, where is that referenced in the report, please?
We've made reference to them. The one I can see is at paragraph 18. I think we referenced them earlier as well, but I can't find it.
If I may, while you're looking at it, Jane, I think the report that Mr. Parton was referring to was on their website.
Oh, sorry.
Not
yes.
Our report. The figures he was quoting was from their website.
That's correct, Chair.
No, it was where it was in our report. So that's, sorry, Jane. I went through that 3 times and couldn't find them, but I have now. So thank you very much.
We now move on to Mrs. Taylor.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple to pick on the points there about, is this about improving children's services or is this about savings? And I think Jane's answered that it's definitely both. We're not going to do anything that makes services any worse. But I think what this is as well, we realise there's pressures in the department, and you can only keep putting a sticky plaster on that for so long, and sometimes you just have to have a total refresh, and this is what this is doing, is looking at a total refresh. We're all our work is done by demand, and I think the work that we're doing at the moment is trying to future proof us for years to come. So it's not just about looking at where we are now, but it's where we're likely to end up in a few years' time, and it's really time to have a total relook of the department and future in the future. So it's definitely about the outcomes for children. It's about future proofing us for the demand as we go forward, and it's also looking at our finances. We've only got a set amount of money, and we have to make sure that we commit that to the children that need us the most, and we need to make sure we're doing that, and this is what this work is going to do. So I think it's going to be really good for the department. I'm looking forward to bringing it back to Scrutiny to get your feedback on it and your help with that, but I think it's a really good opportunity for us to future proof our work going forward. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Sheehan, did you want another comment? Otherwise, we're looking forward to the first report in January.
Mr. Sheehan, still up. It should be down. Sorry about that.
That's okay. That's fine. Now, this report is due to be presented to the Cabinet on the 20th of November, which is the end of this week. Does anyone have any comments other than we've made at the moment that you would wish to be taken into consideration at the Cabinet meeting on Friday?
Chair?
Yes.
Obviously that the report does state the name of the consultants, and the consultants, obviously on their website, which is their gift to do have these quite spectacular figures. There could be an anticipation amongst the public and perhaps the media that if they were to research this, that they would expect to see this level of service improvement or efficiency. Efficiency and improvement actually at this authority, but that's, as James explained, that's not necessarily the case. Each authority they work with has to be different, and I think we need to wait until the work's completed and we receive our first paper next year as to what can be realistically achieved.
Okay, thank you. Jane, you wanted to come back?
Yeah, just to add, I think actually Mr. Parton's answered it as well. Absolutely. So what we will be able to bring back in January is an overview of the anticipated savings that can be achieved through this programme. So Mr. Parton's absolutely right. What we'll be able to come back with in January is a really thorough overview of what can be and what will be achieved in Leicestershire.
Thank you. Right, I see no more hands, and thank you very much, Jane. Thank you very much, everybody, for their comments to this. And we now move on to item 9 on page 21 of your agenda papers, which is the progress report, Ofsted recommendations as part of the Ofsted Continuous Improvement Action Plan 2017 to 2020, the Road to Excellence. This is in response to the single inspection of children's social care in 2016 and the inspection of the local authority children's services in 2019. I now ask that Sharon Cook, the Assistant Director Targeted Early Help and Children's Social Care, to present the item to us. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and good morning, everyone. As outlined by the Chair, the purpose of this report is to update the committee on our continuous improvement plan 2017 to 2020, which encaptures the recommendations of the 2016 inspection of children's social care and the follow-up inspection in 2019. So the report presented to you gives an overview of our continuous improvement plan. We have been to committee on several occasions since 2017 to provide regular updates on the progress of the department against the 17 recommendations that were made in 2016. Of those recommendations, I hope you'll recall that all but 2 of those recommendations were green and embedded prior to our inspection in 2019. 6 recommendations were made as an outcome of the 2019 inspection, and those 6 did include the 2 areas, the 2 of the 17 that we were still in progress and working upon. So we now have a continuous improvement plan that focuses on 6 recommendations. So the road to excellence and the development of the continuous improvement plan provides a vision for improvement that is founded on 4 key aims. So that's about being a learning organisation, embedding excellent practice consistently across the service. Thirdly, making sure that we take the right action at the right time for children and their families, and that we develop our policy and performance to support our work and evidence the progress that we're making and the impact that we're achieving. The plan uses a RAG rating where green shows that we have made good progress against the identified objectives. Amber is that we're on track to deliver within an agreed timescale, and red would signify that we're not achieving against our aims, and that we need to do more focus work or unpick some of the barriers that may be preventing that progress. So Section 6 of the report identifies or lists for members the inspection that took place in September 2019 and the updates to the continuous improvement plan that I have just outlined. What the Section 8 gives you is that details of how we measure progress both against the implementation of processes and new ways or different ways of doing things, and then we measure the impact that we've had from embedding that work, and the impact is very much measured against the impact that it's made for children and families. Section 10 to 25 of the report outlines for you in some detail the areas that we have RAG rated green. So these are the areas where we've made significant progress since September 2019, and we have embedded and are embedding and are starting to see the impact of these changes. I can, for members, answer any questions that you may have about the green areas, but they are listed there in the report 10 to 25, and give an example and a flavour of the work that's been done right across children and family wellbeing to improve the triage, work around in first response to strengthen our approach to children in need, work with the Leicestershire Family Justice Board around our PLO process. The PLO process is the public law outline, so that's the framework, the legal framework that we work within for children subject to care proceedings. It outlines the work in the planning campaign and work across the service to implement that work, and talks of the progress made around permanence for children. But as I say, I'm quite happy to answer any specific questions that the committee may have on those areas. What I wanted to do was concentrate on section 26 onwards of the report, which talks about the areas that are amber, to give committee an update on those areas, hopefully reassure you of the work that's being undertaken, look at some of the challenges to our progress, and similarly then be available to answer any questions. So section 26 of the report talks about the work that's been undertaken in children and family wellbeing services to develop a consistent approach to assessment for children and families requiring that targeted early help support. What I can report to the committee is that assessment framework has now been developed, and we are in discussions about how we implement that framework into our Mosaic system to make that more streamlined and easier for practitioners to use across the service. There is ongoing work around the planning campaign, and we've seen a number of successes and improvements across the service in the quality of plans being written to children, and being smarter, so having time scales in the plans, and how we will monitor progress. But we have further work to do that's going to concentrate on the second part of that planning campaign, which is really to embed that right into the child. A review of the Children's Decision-Making Panel, which is the panel across children and families field work, chaired by a head of service, where cases are presented on a weekly basis, where we have a level of concern about a child or children within a family and are considering that we may need to formalise our planning with them around the public law outline, which may mean a period in what's known as pre-proceedings while we work with the family to try and prevent us going into proceedings, or that we make the decision that's right for some children that the local authority has to go to court to share parental responsibility for that child. Lots of work has been done around the processes of that panel over the last 12 months, and a full review has been completed and is due to be presented with recommendations to the senior management team on the 30th of November. A further strand to the work, and an area that continues to be a challenge for us, but one where we can evidence progress, is around the recruitment and retention of social work staff. So the committee's heard before the national issue that is presented to most authorities about the recruitment and retention of staff. And you've heard and have received copies and information about our recruitment and retention strategy, and how the service has been developing and continues to develop our service to make Leicestershire the chosen place for people not only to start their social work career, but to continue that career and be part of an experienced and skilled workforce. Whilst that remains a continuing focus for us, what I can say to you is that there has been a lot of work that's continued even during this period of lockdown. We're now in a position that we have 52 vacancies across children's social care. 40 of those have been recruited to, and the staff recruited to are going through the pre-employment checks. And the 12 remaining vacancies are out to recruitment. So whilst this has been a challenging period for us during lockdown, we've continued to see success in being able to recruit to posts. And just as a note, to the committee, those vacancies are not all turnover with staff leaving. Many are where staff have been promoted within another part of our service, and that's a positive move for them and for us in the service. But they also include the growth posts that we put in this year, so they were additional posts. Whilst that is extremely successful and is credit to the hard work of managers within the service, it is worth noting that a large number of those recruits are newly qualified social workers, and we do, in the first year of their employment, need to give them a protected caseload and further training to help them successfully move to level 2. We have a challenge that during COVID, some of the universities delayed the completion of the final stages of their social work training. So we do, whilst a lot of newly qualified workers would have joined us this summer, and some have, there is a delay in some newly qualified staff joining us into the early part of next year because of the impact of COVID on the completion of their course. We currently have 46 agency workers employed across the service to cover those vacancies and provide support to children and families during the period until we get the permanent recruits in. Some of those are also covering where there is a long-term absence, for example, a maternity cover. And some of those agencies will remain to provide the additional support to ASYEs, the newly qualified staff, in the first year, but our numbers of agency are reducing significantly. Research in Practice. Research in Practice are an organisation that we work in partnership with that provide training and research, up-to-date research for the profession, and we have worked hard with them to look at further training around supervision and increasing supervision skills of our managers and supervisors, and the report at section 30 outlines the further work that we're doing around that. And they have also developed some effective leadership training for us that is taking place across November to December. There was a delay in that training taking place due to COVID. It should have taken place earlier in the spring. We waited because we wanted that training to be face-to-face, but as time has gone on and it's become more obvious that returning to face-to-face training is not going to happen in the near future, that training has been adapted and will take place online for our managers starting this month. A task group has been working on how we write case records to children, and they have piloted that work across many of our children in care services. Further work and training, practice development training for staff has taken place, and we are rolling out that way of writing records to the child. What we're seeing and what the impact is of people taking time to ensure the records are written to children is that those records are becoming more meaningful for children if they wish to see them either now or later in their lives. It's embedding with staff the importance of the records not being an authority record, it's a child's record, and therefore is improving the care that staff are taking in completing those records. So they're no longer seen as a process of something that managers check. They are seen very much as us custodians of records for children for the future, for them to be able to understand why we were involved in their lives and some of the decisions and important decisions that were taken for them. Work is continuing with the IROs, training and development sessions for them to be very clearly driving as part of their role the oversight of plans both for children on child protection and children who are in care. And at 34, I outlined for you the mosaics. That's our records, our electronic records function, and some of the work that's being done has been done around mosaic. So the challenges to the progress are outlined in section 35 onwards of the report. I've talked already about the recruitment and retention of staff. And I've talked about the development of an assessment model that we've seen great success at recruiting newly qualified social workers to the service. Section 38 talks about a social work organisation resilience diagnostic, which is a sword. That again is something that's been developed by Research in Practice, And we, at our social work conference in July, talked to staff and launched this with staff as being a way of us looking at how we build that resilience and that environment that really helps social work and social workers flourish. In September, we launched the survey that's part of that sword to our staff. So over September and October, members of staff have had the opportunity to fill that in as a health assessment for us to understand and see and hear how our staff feel about working for us. We don't yet have the full results of that survey. That's something that Research in Practice are pulling together for us as I speak. And section 39 onwards talks about some of the impact of COVID-19. So while we've been in the fortunate position that we were able very quickly to get our staff, who didn't have it, the electronic equipment to enable them to work from home safely, we completed and continue to complete COVID risk assessments on all children that are open to us, which in line with their plan and the plan of working actually looks at those most vulnerable children that require a level of face-to-face contact when that's safe to do, and those children where we've been able to maintain some contact with them and some work with them virtually and over the internet. Our priority, I'm sure as the committee would support and understand, has been to ensure that those services to vulnerable children continue during this period, and we've successfully been able to do that. The challenge for us has been that in some of our development work, we may have had to take more time over some of that development while we've been prioritising seeing children. What I can report is the impact on that area has been very minimal, and I'm pleased to say that due to the staffing levels and the sheer hard work and commitment of the workforce in children and families, we've been able to maintain not only the work with children and families, but we've been able to maintain the progress against our improvement plan. And in section 40, I outlined that whilst we've had success in reducing and looking at the optimum number of cases and workload that social workers should have, we've not been able to get all our senior practitioners onto the level of caseloads that we would want to. In some parts of the service, particularly in locality field work, the demands upon the service have meant that caseloads still remain higher than we would want them to be. That in some way has been due to some level of sickness and absence. It's not been a high level, but it has been around the increased numbers of children on child protection plans during COVID-19. We have audited and taken a deep dive look at those cases and believe that due to the lack, especially in the first period of lockdown, the unavailability of certain other partners and family members who help protect some of our vulnerable children, it led to, and the impact of COVID, especially on families where adult mental health issues or domestic abuse issues are a critical factor. It has led to an increase in the number of children on child protection plans. And there has also been some delay in the court availability for final hearings. So some children who are subject to proceedings, those proceedings are taking longer to conclude due in many ways to the availability of court timetable to hear face-to-face some of the complex issues. So whilst those two key pressures plus the work that's still coming into the service, have meant that in locality field work we have seen an increase in caseloads, but it's something that the senior management team have oversight of and are responding to, and we have as part of agency agreed additionality, especially across one particular locality, to reduce that pressure on staff. So although an issue, we have responded to that issue. So I hope that takes you through in some detail the progress that's been made, the challenges that we have faced, especially around COVID-19, and gives you some oversight of the areas that are classed as amber that we are making progress against. There are no items that are red and no items or areas that we don't expect and aren't driving progress to be in place by our revised Road to Excellence, which will run from 2021 for 3 years. But this work, in addition to the work outlined by Jane in the Defining Children's Services, will put the service in a very strong position when Ofsted next are due to inspect us for a full inspection. But I will just emphasise that our commitment is not doing this work for Ofsted, it's doing this work to make things better for children, and I think the service is continuing to make progress in all areas. So that's the presentation of the report, and obviously I'll answer any questions.
Thank you very much indeed, Sharon, and thank you very much for a very full report, and also for all the hard work that department does. And as you say, we're looking at your detailed report on the amber conditions is excellent. I have 4 people that have indicated they want to speak. The first one's Mr. Welsh, then Mr. Parton, and then Mrs. Wright and Mr. Sheehan. So, Mr. Welsh.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for that very comprehensive report, Sharon. I don't know why, but I've got very intrigued by section 11, and I wonder if you can talk me through what's actually happening in the room. Is this saying that any calls to do with the wellbeing service are actually going across the first response desk so that we're taking them all at first response, or is it saying that we're following the same protocols but doing the work separately? Does that make sense, Sharon?
Yeah, no, it does. We've always, our first response and our screening team in first response has always been the front door for both children and family wellbeing and for children's social care. What we have been focusing on and being tighter on is as it worked previously, the cases would come in, whether by a referral or a phone call, and identified very quickly which part of the service needed to respond to them. So if a school made a referral asking for a service from children and family wellbeing, the screening process would simply be to signpost that into children and family wellbeing. They then, in that part of the service, as those in first response, have workers that look in some detail at what's needed for that child and then make sure the correct service, the correct part of their service area is picking up the cases. What we know and what was identified or confirmed rather by Ofsted is that when the Children and Family Wellbeing Service was reviewed and revised and came together as a service, bringing all the targeted early help services together, They were working very hard on making sure that they had a timely response to all the children requiring that service and a level of service. And we did, at the time of the Ofsted inspection, have some children who were waiting for an early help service. So that was one of the things that they said to us, is you've identified a need for this child and family, and they are waiting for the service. Now, some of that we could push back on, because sometimes the level of service required is group work, and actually having contact with the family and talking about the right timing of the next group, it's appropriate for them, that child and family, to wait. But what we've done, and it's been a complete review, and it's been the head of children family wellbeing and the head of social care and service managers have worked really hard together to look at how we tighten that process around the front door, so that children are identified, the service those children need is identified quickly, and we get them to the service quickly, and we don't have processes that then could be causing some delay for the child. So what happens is that the referral comes into screening work hard, children family wellbeing screening, work alongside our screening in children's social care to assess, identify and get those children to the right service. And what we've actually seen is a vast reduction in that waiting time. What we want to test out is that the reduction, we are mindful that during the first period of lockdown, our numbers of referrals into children and family wellbeing were lower because schools weren't in place. So whilst we've tested out that model and it's working well, we now want to keep testing it as those referrals to children and family wellbeing are increasing again. And we have agreed some additional posts that sit. So we are locating, although it's virtually at the moment because of lockdown, we are locating our children and family wellbeing triage workers in with first response. So physically they are together and working across, and it's seen to be working more effectively and stronger. And as the committee probably are aware, the children and family wellbeing services have moved over to my portfolio, so that working and that line management route is now working even stronger than it did before.
Thank you very much, Sharon. That was really helpful and comprehensive. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Parton.
Sharon, you certainly explain problems and solutions in great specific detail and clearly, and that's one of your major strengths. I'd like to sort of praise you for that. Thank you very much. In 2016, Ofsted gave 17 recommendations, and then in 2019, Ofsted gave 6. So obviously, it could be argued that there 11 were rectified and 6 remained. However, judging by having spoken to other people in the meeting, including Mrs. Taylor, that's not actually the case. So could you tell us, Sharon, which ones were carried over? So that is, which of the points that Ofsted raised in 2016 in 2019 still remained, and what do we think the reasons were that they persisted?
Okay, yeah, I can. I think just to give some context and to remind the committee that the inspection framework in 2019 was a different framework to 2016, and that is important to remember, because some of the way that Ofsted conduct their inspection and some of the things that they looked for and were inspecting were slightly different than in 2016. So we do need to remember that. We also need to note that Ofsted, by the very nature of their work, will always make recommendations to local authorities. So we study, and I have read a number of Ofsted reports for authorities that are outstanding and good, to look at learning from them, and they invariably have a number of recommendations. So I only say that because we would never get an Ofsted report, even when we get to good and outstanding, that doesn't have some recommendations, because it's about continual learning and improvement. The two key areas that we were still focusing on and still working upon when Ofsted came in 2019 were around that consistency of practice right across the service. So we'd made lots of progress around practice standards, growing quality in children's social care, and could see and evidence some areas of real strength around that practice. And as members will, I know, recall, we were graded good in two of the categories of the Ofsted inspection. But the consistency across the whole service of making sure that level of practice was of a high standard consistently was still something that we were working on. And linked to that, the second area, which does link very clearly to it, was about that consistency in management oversight. And the two, as I'm sure you'll appreciate, those two things are very much integrated. So those two areas are identified within the 6 recommendations that Ofsted made in 2019, in that they talked in those recommendations, or they put in those recommendations, that they needed to, they saw evidence that where children were considered to be at risk, that our approach was timely, our work was good. But for children who needs were identified to be not at immediate risk, so those children in need, that sometimes our assessments and getting work in place for them wasn't as timely as it could be. And that was linked very much to the practice and the management oversight. So that recommendation, whilst addressing that recommendation, continues to address the areas of management oversight and consistency of practice. And through all our recommendations and all the work we do, because we do continue to improve and make progress against areas that are beyond the recommendations from Ofsted, those two key areas of how we make sure wherever the child receives a service, whoever their worker is, that is of a consistently high standard, and the managers have consistently high standards of management oversight of those cases and driving those plans. They are the two key areas for us. And I hope are evidenced in the report when I've talked about the work that we're doing around developing practice and our training for managers, our performance monitoring. All those areas are areas that help us embed that both the practice and that management oversight.
Fine, mute. Mrs. Wright.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, Sharon, I wrote, wow, thank you very much for a very comprehensive and full report. So just echoing what other members have said, really, and thank you for that. And to be fair, I think you've picked off most of my questions if you've gone through and answered them. But my first question really relates to point 16, and then I think goes into 26, which you did allude to, regarding the implementation of the 3-month updates to improve the recording of records and everything. And it may be too early to comment, but I was just wondering what's happened, and it is what they're revealing at this time. The other point was just regarding the consultation on the children's decision-making panel and the business case, and just wondered, just out of interest, who was consulted on that business case. And finally, you did touch on it. It was about how do we prevent staff burning out in a very busy and tough environment. And you did talk about the protected caseloads and everything. So I was really pleased to hear about that and the result of the SWORD survey that's gone out, but we've not quite got the report yet. So thank you again. And if you could just answer those couple of points, thank you.
I will, yes, thank you. Yeah, the 3-monthly update has been implemented across the service, and as part of our ongoing audit activity, we are picking up on a good use of that tool. We have factored in a specific audit that will look at the quality of 3-monthly updates, and I can bring to a future committee or one of the panels that feeds into this committee the outcome of that at a later stage. What we are finding from the updates is that social workers are using those updates to write to the child about the significant things that have happened in the previous 3 months of the case. It becomes a good summary for a number of things, a good summary to complete with the child for them to identify what's happened, and we are encouraging staff to not only put the big things in there, but also link some of the achievements, however small they are for our children, because it's so important that they have that in their history. So children in care don't always want to know later in life just the big decisions that were made. They do want to know what their favourite nursery rhyme was and when they could first recite it, or when they got a merit at school or won at a game. So we're really trying to get people to focus on what is it that we would tell our own children, and those stories that we would have for our own children, and how important it is for children in care to have that information. We're encouraging that those 3-monthly summaries are then a good thing for a worker to take into supervision, because it gives the manager a good oversight of the case, and so enables that reflective supervision to take place, but for us to help drive plans for those children. So and we have done a number of learning events, virtual learning events, where we've had a lot of staff link into sessions with our principal social worker that's gone through those 3-monthly summaries, giving them ideas and advice how to complete them. But as I say, we are picking up in our general auditing their use of them, but we are going to do a specific piece of work on them. In relation to the children's decision-making panel, it isn't necessarily a business case, and perhaps I've put that too strongly if that's what's been said. We have a children's decision-making panel. We've done a lot of work both when we established that panel and in its whilst it's been in place, to continually revise and develop that, to make that a really strong structure that listens, hears of cases where we are concerned and those children may be going into either pre-proceedings or proceedings. It is chaired by a head of service and has a number of service managers that sit on that panel. Social workers present their assessments and the work, and there is a discussion and an agreement of a way forward. And that doing it in that way was about us bringing some consistency that we didn't have in different localities, different managers having those discussions. So it's brought about consistency. The work that's come into senior management team is I asked for a review to make sure that our processes, our paperwork, our outcomes of taking children through that panel are reviewed, so we know that that is the best and the strongest way to do it. So the work's been done by the heads of service and service managers that are leading on that work. And then in relation to staff and burnout, it is it's a continual, we have and have to admire the staff within the service, both social work and non-social work staff who work tirelessly with children and families who have experienced and are dealing with some of the most traumatic situations that we could think about. So it is very much on our agenda as part of our recruitment and retention to ensure good quality supervision, and we monitor the frequency of that supervision, and I can report that at SMT 2 weeks ago, we were looking at that our staff are receiving, in the 90% are getting all the supervision that they should have. We do audits, which have included an audit in August of mine and heads of service supervision of staff. So we had our supervision of staff audited to make sure that there's learning for us, to make sure that we are reflective, but as part of driving the service, we are taking account of workers' well-being, their training needs, their support needs on an individual and team basis. Our recruitment and retention strategy includes work we're doing to acquire some specific and independent support for staff that may deal with the most traumatic circumstances. We utilise our wellbeing service, so if staff need to access independent counselling to support them, that is encouraged and that's on offer. And during lockdown, as part of our management teams, we always start with sharing information about how teams are supporting staff. So are those staff are working at home, how they have a coffee catch up in the morning as a team, all the things that they do that encourages and supports their well-being. So it's very much on our agenda. It's very much an area that we continue to learn on, and we have continued to celebrate success for our workers. And as I said, although we had to hold it virtually, we had a social work conference in the summer still, and last week we hosted a Pride in Practice event where we awarded and celebrated staff right across the service in a number of areas. So, and I've had very, very positive feedback from staff about how that recognition makes them feel. So I think they're all parts of how we create an environment that we understand fully is an extremely charged environment and stressful environment at times, but we do the utmost to make that environment one where staff feel that they can practice safely.
Brilliant. Thank you, Sharon. Very comprehensive. If we could take up the offer of having the outcomes, brought back to scrutiny, that would be really good. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yeah.
Thank you. Mr. Sheehan.
Thank you, Chair. Sharon, you've made some good progress on recruitment according to the reports. Does it still remain your biggest challenge within the context of this report? If so, what are you currently aiming for and what are the next steps?
Yeah, it does remain our biggest challenge, because a stable and skilled workforce is the way for us to achieve many of the other things that we want and need to achieve for children and families. And to get that consistency of practice, you need a consistent and stable workforce and a skilled workforce. So it does remain, constantly remains our challenge. So although we've seen success in recruitment, that doesn't stop. We will continue with our recruitment of staff. We continue to have a really strong ASYE programme. So that's and ASYEs are newly qualified social workers. So for the first 12 months in the profession, they get additional, not only get a protected caseload, they get additional support from a practice mentor, which is an experienced social worker, and a programme of training that's developed and led by colleagues in learning and development. And our feedback from ASYEs on how that programme has developed and improved over the last 3 years is testament to the work of a number of people. We also are supporting a number of non-social work qualified staff to undertake their social work training as part of apprenticeships. So we've now got 2 cohorts of staff who are undertaking that training at Warwick University, and we're in the process of going through a selection process to identify the next cohort of staff. So another 12 months, we will start year on year to get it's 6 people who will be trained. And the benefit of that method of training is they tend to be staff who have worked for the authority, worked for Leicestershire for a long time. They are a known commodity, if you like. Their skill base is known, and their commitment to the authority. And then I think that our evidence is that then the authority's commitment to training of them leads to many of those staff remaining with the authority for a long time. So that's a good retention process. And then thirdly, we have discussed at committee before that we entered into an arrangement with Frontline, which was a government-sponsored organisation that identify people that have already got a first or 2-1 in their degree who go into social work, and Frontline work with them and work with the authorities that have a unit for the first 12 months of their employment to really fast track and give them quality training before they then go on to what would be their ASYE, their newly qualified status. So this year, this is the 3rd year that we have worked with Frontline. We've increased, so we've now got 2 units of staff. So we've got 8 staff, Frontline staff, that have started with us. And what I can say is that the staff that went to be ASYEs last year, or just started sort of earlier this year on the ASYE, are doing extremely well. And the first staff that did the Frontline have just completed their ASYE and are proving to be exceptional practitioners. So we are doing a lot of work around progression, training, development opportunities with staff. I think the recruitment and retention will always be an issue in a children's social care service. I think we've made a lot of progress over the last 3 years to put us in a much stronger position to be an employer that attracts and retains staff.
So we can look forward to continued improvement in the retention, recruitment. Sorry, yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. Ted, did you want to come back quickly, or another question? Ted, you're muted.
Sorry, I apologise. I keep forgetting to lower my hand. Sorry.
Mrs. Fry, you're on mute.
Right, thank you, Gemma. Right, thank you very much, everybody. Really thorough report as always. We're now moving on to item 10 in the agenda, which is the Leicestershire Fostering Agency Statutory Report. We receive this on an annual basis, and this report covers the period March 2019 to March 2020. So it doesn't cover the time we've been in COVID or lockdown. Sharon, I believe yourself and Joss Longman, the Service Manager Fostering and Adoption and Sufficiency, are going to present this to us.
Yeah, yes, Chair. I will take you through the main parts of the report, and then Joss is here as the service manager to answer any detailed questions that you may have around the attached copy of the annual report that's been provided for members. And just to say, we know the formatting and presentation of that report will, after this committee, go to comms for further tidying up of the report, but we wanted committee members to have a chance to see it, make any comments, and if we needed to make any amendments, we would do that before it went to committee. So the report, as you say, Chair, is the annual report that is outlining our performance against the fostering agency from March 19 until March 20. We are responsible for our local authority fostering agency and all the statutory responsibilities related to fostering. And under the national minimum standards, it's expected that fostering agencies provide a report that talks about the activity of that agency during the year. It's the work of the agency in its entirety, so that includes the work of the fostering panel as well. And as I say, that report in its current format, it has been presented for you to read. So in summary, I think it's probably not an underestimation to say that we recognise that we provide our fostering services in a very competitive market. So not only local authorities provide fostering agencies, we've talked before about independent fostering agencies that we're in competition for to both recruit our foster carers and retain those carers. We have ambitious priorities, and our priorities and targets that were set out in the year that we're now looking at was to increase our marketing share of mainstream foster carers. So there are general foster carers, to increase the number of kinship carers. So there are connected carers who have a connection with the child. So it could be an extended family member or friend, but has a significant relationship. And when the child comes into care, they put themselves forward to be a carer for them. We also have a target to increase our supported lodgings. So that's for our older young people, and it's that less not living within a family, a fostering family, but living in a supported environment where our young people can gain all those valuable skills and support to move successfully on into independence. We also have a target to increase our specialist foster carers. So we've talked about our one-to-one level 6 carers who have a professional background and skill set and work intensively with some of our youngsters who have had the most challenging backgrounds and experiences to help support them move successfully into a family-based placement. And we have a real key part of the fostering service is not only getting those carers through the door and assessing them and approving them, but it's about the quality of our support to them once they are carers, for them to be the best possible carers they can be to support our children, and obviously we want them to stay with this authority. So the team or the service is made up of several teams. We've got the recruitment team that do all the recruitment of prospective foster carers. We have an assessment team that complete those assessments of our mainstream carers. We then have the team around the child, which are the supervising social workers that support our approved carers in their role. We have the kinship team, that assesses and supports kinship carers, as I outlined earlier. And then we have a dedicated placement support service, which is a team of staff who support our specialist carers, our supported lodgings, but also provide a fantastic service to any youngster or carers where there are wobbles and we need to wrap around a service to support those children. And that's a 24-hour service, 7 days a week, whatever is needed to support those children and carers through any difficulties and wobbles to get them to the other side, to more stability. And we also have our independent visitors, so our assessment of and support to independent visitors who visit some of our children in care. So some of the key outlines and achievements are that the recruitment of new carers in 19 to 20. So we received and processed 499 fostering inquiries. Of those inquiries, because sometimes people inquire about fostering and they're not quite sure about it. They make an inquiry, and actually at that inquiry stage, it's obvious that it's something else that they really want. So it might be it's adoption, and we refer them and link them into our adoption service. It might be that really what they're wanting to do is a more befriending, independent visitor role. So if they, in our discussions and inquiries, if there is a skill, if there is a desire by them to provide something to our children, and they have the right skills and qualities to do that, our recruitment specialists make sure that we get them to the right place to be assessed. Of that number of inquiries, we undertook 90 initial visits with applicants in their home. So that's really about the first stage of seeing where they live, what they've got, whether physically they've got the space to take foster children, goes through some of the initial checks, so police checks, other things that need to be undertaken before they go into the next stages of the process. So 54 of those processed to stage 1 assessment, 17 households were approved, so that created 23 additional care placements for our children. We approved 1 pathway carer, so that's about specialist carers that I talked about. We approved 5 supported lodging carers, and 36 kinship carers were approved. So they were the numbers that were approved during that year. We increased the capacity of our dedicated placement support team to provide the support I've already outlined. And as point 8 onwards in the report talks about, we've strengthened and revised our foster care review paperwork. So we're making sure that the quality of chronologies, the support that we give to our foster carers is really clear. And we've strengthened the voice within the service and support within the service to the sons and daughters of foster carers, because we've acknowledged and research tells us that it's so important when somebody fosters that we make sure that if they have their own children, that we include their children in that fostering process. And we've done a lot of work and do a lot of activities with those children to therefore then in turn make sure that when our children are placed within those families, it's really successful. So point 10 onwards talks about some of the key activity as well in the service. So as well as the number of assessments completed for foster carers, we've done approvals assessments on 8 private fostering arrangements. So we have a responsibility when they are identified to us for us to assess that those children and their arrangements are safe and right for them. We've completed 9 adoption orders, which are non-agency, so that could be a step parent who applies to adopt a child, and we are asked by the courts to do a report and an assessment on them. We've got 35 children are living with supported lodgings providers, and 90% of our young people in supported lodgings have placement stability, and that is a really high percentage that shows the success of this model to supporting our older young people successfully into that independence. We run a foster carers survey, and that survey year on year has given evidence of the improvements that we're making, how our foster carers feel valued by the staff within the service and the support that they receive. And it also gives us ideas and pointers of things that we want to do better and can do better. For example, we have locality support groups for our foster carers, and when we've had feedback on the success of those or how they've run, we've been able to work with foster carers to improve them. So for 2021, our key priorities continue to be to improve and want to look at specific campaigns to increase our foster carers, supported lodging specialist carers. We have campaigns that focus on particular groups. So we have done, and we want to continue to increase the number of foster carers who will take a parent and child to do that work with young, vulnerable parents and their babies. We have campaigns that look at carers who can provide care to some of our children with very complex disabilities and complex needs. And we have a campaign and have held campaigns for foster carers to work with teenagers. Targets for 2021 are to increase our mainstream carers by 25, specialist carers by 2, supported lodging carers by 5, and to have 20 new independent visitors. Obviously, if we get more, we'll be delighted. When we have a target, we don't stop when we reach the target, we keep going, but they're the targets that we've set ourselves. They're really about the additional work we'll be doing about the enhanced carers pathway, further training, bespoke training about loss and helping, particularly to help carers who are helping children move on to those permanent long-term placements. So I think that gives an overview of what's in the very detailed report on behalf of the service. And as I say, Joss is now within the session, the meeting. So if there are particular questions, either Joss or myself will answer them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sharon, and a really detailed report and a fascinating actual annual report with all the photographs and comments to read as well. Excellent. Right, I have 3 people who've indicated they'd like to talk. Mr. Welsh first, then Dr. Feltham, and then Mr. Kaufman. So, Mr. Welsh.
Thank you, Chair. The report talks about different types of carers, and I don't want the answer now, Chair, but I wondered if somebody can produce me a briefing note that explains what are pathway carers, yes, supported lodging carers, kinship carers, specialist carers, and then we've got enhanced carers pathway, and I think some was mentioned level 6. Can we have all of these defined so we understand them, please, in a briefing paper? Thanks, Chair. Thank
you very much. Sharon, if you could, and Joss could arrange that and have it sent out to us all, it might be useful for all councillors to know the differences, so that if we're asked, in conversation with our residents, they understand what it is. If that's possible, if you could circulate that to us, because if we try and take it all down now, we'll get even more confused if we start writing it So if you could get that out to us particularly, but also to all councillors, I think that would be really helpful.
Okay. Certainly. We've got we do have a produced booklet that talks about all our specialist schemes, so we'll attach that as well to that for you.
Good.
Thanks, Jess.
Thank you very much, John.
Mrs. Fry, you're muted.
Dr. Feltham now, please.
Thanks very much, Chairman. It's paragraph 6, really, that I'm interested in, where you talk about the 499 fostering inquiries, but then only 90 initial visits and then 54 go on to stage 1. It doesn't seem a very big conversion rate, if I call it that. And I'm just wondering, I mean, obviously a huge amount of work has to go to going through reviewing everything, taking it down to 90, then down to 54. I'm just wondering if whether when you're putting advertisements out for fosterers, maybe the wording might be, I don't know. I just think, yeah, you're looking at over 400 inquiries being not progressed, or at least progressed, but obviously then a lot of the work goes to filtering them all out. I just wondered if there's any other perhaps wording that could be used in order to try to improve the conversion rate, if I call it that. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, Joss can come in with some of the details, but we're continually looking at how we improve and reviewing the fostering standards. Obviously, the standards are set nationally, so it's not simply a Leicestershire what we want from a carer. We have certain standards that quite rightly need to be met, because we're placing some of our most vulnerable children with these families. So it's right that we do those proper checks. As I said earlier, a number of those inquiries might be people that are phoning up to inquire, and actually they are thinking of fostering in the future, and they're getting advice now for coming back to us. And we do, for those that that seems a real possibility, we do keep a link and a contact there to get them back at the right time for them. And there are a number that they may, when they're talking through with us, it might be something else that they are really skilled and wanting to do, or it may be that really when they're talking to us, what they're talking about is wanting adoption. So if it's adoption, independent visiting, whatever skill they have and however they could work with our children, we do filter them into the right part of the service. But it is an area that we continually work at. It is an area that we are going to be working with as part of our defining children's services to see how we can make even more efficiencies, better ways, just how we work. We're continually wanting to improve the numbers of carers that we take. Joss, I don't know whether you want to say any more to that.
No, I think you've covered it all really, Sharon. I mean, what I would say is in the previous year, where maybe there's been carers that we thought, oh, maybe there is an opportunity, we've brought them through, but actually what's then happened is that they've fallen out of the recruitment process in the second stage. So actually by trying to gatekeep a bit more carers that are coming through, we had less fallout. So we actually had the people that dropped out through the assessment was half than it had been the year before. And that is part of the work that we're looking forward to do with Newton Europe. If there are opportunities that we're missing, we're going to go and talk to the local authorities. We meet as an East Midlands region. There is a general decline in the amount of foster carers that are coming through the process. There are shortages of foster carers nationally. But also what we have done is we've introduced a decision to proceed. So where we have done where we've done initial visits, we then go and a manager then has oversight about what the strengths and vulnerabilities are of people that we're considering. And then we make a decision to then bring them through to the service. So there is that greater level of scrutiny that we're not being too fussy, that if there is opportunities, and certainly as Sharon alluded to, some of it is about building a relationship with our carers, and we've had a number of carers who work in independent fostering agencies that want to come to Leicestershire. They've heard about the good work that Leicestershire does with our dedicated placement support team and our training. We're currently assessing 5, possibly 7 carers who are currently fostering for another authority but want to join Leicestershire. So some of it is word of mouth, that people come back to us and that they're maybe not in that position. We've just had some carers who we were interested in a year ago. Their personal circumstances meant that they couldn't progress the assessment, but have now come back to us and said, actually, it's the right time now and we want to come to Leicestershire. So some of it is around working for a local authority. That I think people now in this current climate actually want to be part of local authorities as well.
Thank you. Mr. Kaufman.
Thank you, Chair. One's a general question, and one is, if I can refer to the report. The general question is, a few years ago, we were told that there were plans to merge adoption and fostering agencies into regional groups. Has that actually now been dropped? I know that I heard from the comments before that you're working together as an East Midland regional group, but there were plans that I understood that to take the fostering agencies and adoption agencies away from the counties, and that's number one. And number two, I wonder if paragraph 10 of the report, it talks about 8 private fostering approvals. And tie that in with the comments earlier. How do we get involved in the private fostering approvals? And is there a possibility that private fostering approvals could be happening without anybody knowing about them? So those 2 questions, if I may, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Thanks for your couch, Mr. Kaufman. In relation to regional, there are no plans or push for regional fostering agencies. As Joss and I have both hopefully outlined, we work very much with our colleagues in the region to ensure that good practice and progress is shared, but there are no plans for regional fostering agencies. There is from the Department of Education an expectation and a push in the last few years that for regional adoption agencies, and many authorities have come together to form an independent regional adoption agency. And I think there have been discussions at previous overview and scrutiny panel about Leicestershire's position and some concerns about that when it first started. What we have done, and I believe the committee had an information paper at the last panel, the last committee meeting about this, is that we've entered a partnership with Lincolnshire, Leicester City, North Lincolnshire and Rutland to form under the regional adoption arrangements, a partnership. So we are working in partnership with those authorities to work to the best possible issues around working together around an agency, 8 authorities working together, but we retain as each authority responsibility for our adoption services, and Leicestershire adopters are approved by Leicestershire. Leicestershire children are placed with them. So we have worked on a model that ensures that we comply with the expectations about a regional adoption, but we've done that as part of a partnership, and that's been agreed by the Department of Education. As the paper came as information to a previous committee outlining the arrangements for that. But in relation to fostering, there is no plan for such an arrangement. The fostering service is very much Leicestershire's service. And in relation to private fostering, Nationally, there is a concern that there could be arrangements that are made by families that are in fact private fostering arrangements, and they don't get reported. I think all authorities are aware of that, and the numbers of cases that are referred through for private fostering assessments are relatively small in every authority. And it was an area in our 2016 inspection. It was one of the recommendations that we've done a lot of work on. I think the criteria for it not being private fostering is really quite a tight criteria, and I think some families probably make arrangements that they think is a family arrangement, and actually aren't aware that they've met the private fostering arrangement. So a child could go and live with a grandparent, fine, but if a child goes to live with, say, mum's cousin, very close to them, very close family member, that arrangement actually would fall within a private fostering arrangement. And I think sometimes families aren't aware of those things. We did, from 2016 and continue, have done a lot of publication. We've had information on our intranet. We've written out to schools. We've written to GPs. We've publicised and done a lot of work about what are private fostering arrangements, so that if a child in school, a school know that a child's living with a family member or even a friend of the family, that may be perfectly right arrangements for that child. It's not that they're all bad arrangements, but they do legally have to report it to the authority for us to complete an assessment and check that that child is safe and well in those arrangements. So they are the circumstances, they are the regulations that we work to. We continue to publicise it, and we have had to do a number of assessments.
Thank you. Did you want, Jeff, you're muted?
Yeah. So I'm trying to. Can I ask, the 8 that we have that are on this list here, were they people that came to us, or were they found through whatever publicity you were doing, or schools, or whatever that?
Yeah, they've been referred to us, so they could have been referred to us. There will be different individual circumstances, but primarily they will be the family may have contacted us about not being able to care for one of their children, as an example, and they may contact us to talk about that, and within the discussion it becomes apparent that the child's living elsewhere, and we pick up that that's private fostering. It could be that a family that's a member of the public contacts us and says that their child's friend has ended up living with them because the parent won't care for them or can't care for them, and they're living, and they ring us about support. It could be a school or another profession that become aware of a child's circumstances. So they can come to us for all sorts of reasons. We do the private fostering assessment to make sure that placement's right and the child is safe and well. And as part of that assessment, we determine whether that's a longer term placement or not. And we also determine whether they are, by the very definition, children in need, and we need to be offering other services and support to them and the family.
Chair, I'm very happy about the children that are being looked after by Leicestershire, but I'm less happy from what I found out today about this apparent random nature. I'm not blaming anybody in the council. I'm happy once our departments know about the children, but I've learned something today that I'm not terribly happy about, that there could be random children that nobody knows about in random placements, and I think we ought to be making more publicity of that, because it's the first time I've heard about it, and that's a small thing that worries me, but nothing else on the report. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it is a concern, but I think we have to bear in mind circumstances change for each child. And I know of cases where parents have died and other parents or other relatives have stepped in, and then they go through the official pieces. But the first few months, all they're concerned about is that the children are safe and well. And I think we do it that way. But thank you. Mrs. Wright.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to say, I found the report really interesting. As somebody new coming to the committee, I thought it was very interesting, very enlightening, and it really makes you feel how special these people are who foster, who care. And one of the points that came out, and because, you know, fostering is so important and the support they receive, particularly, there was a part in there about mentors and how important mentoring is to people. But sometimes we struggle to get mentors into the system. And I was just interested to see how that's working and what we're doing to try and get more mentors and to support the carers and the foster carers in the system.
Okay, so we last year we developed our mentoring scheme. So that is for foster carers who, when they're in the assessment process, are supported by a mentor who's an existing foster carer, and then 6 months after they're approved. So they've got a point of contact that's not their supervising social worker or their assessing social worker, and part of their role is to link them into the locality support groups and into different groups that the carers are involved with. We've got a group of mentors. We've never had a situation where we've had somebody that's wanted to have a mentor, not have a mentor. Some of it is around the confidence that our foster carers have in themselves and about actually how good they are to be able to encourage people and to share their experiences of them coming through panels. So what we do as part of their supervision and as part of their annual review is look at their capacity to then become a mentor. And we have managed to maintain that through kind of the COVID period. So it's been telephone calls, it's been Skype calls, it's been those kinds of things. So where we've needed them, we've had them. What we will be doing is encouraging more carers to take a leap of confidence in themselves, that their experience and their journey is really valuable, and that's what we should be sharing with other carers as well.
Thank you. Mr. Parton.
I'm referring to a couple of points. The first one is it goes back to some statistical data that Dr. Felton mentioned. On the there is a section where on page 46 where the what do we do and then outcomes. It seems like those statistics are quite misleading because they're done in a way to make it look as if a lot of people progress to approval. But actually, if you took the number of, for example, 300, that leaves you with 6 that progress to approval. Now, it's understood that it's the explanation as to the reason for the low number that actually progress to approval has been mentioned. I mean, I can think of, like in the fire authority, the amount of people that apply to be a firefighter, the amount that actually passed final passing out parade. So it's understood, but that could seem like that's a bit misleading. And the other thing is, on page 40, the bottom paragraph says, this report should be read alongside the recruitment and retention strategy. That recruitment and retention strategy, when you look at it on the council's website, seems to relate not to foster carers, but to thinking of developing a recruitment policy, holiday club and play schemes. Does that perhaps need some more specific wording, or is that actually, how does that, or if that's correct, how does that fit in with foster carers?
Hi, Sharon, do you want me just to talk about the recruitment and retention strategy? Hi, Nikki Collins here. Hi. Just to let you know, we have a fostering recruitment and retention strategy. So we can probably clarify that, and it is published online. So we can make sure that the appropriate link is referenced in the document, and then that will clear that up.
Thanks, Nikki.
Yeah, that would be good. Yeah, so that obviously.
Okay, thank you. And then. Yeah, thanks. We'll make sure that that's clear. And then just in relation to the other issue, Joss has referenced how we managed that foster carer's journey through approval, and that right in the beginning we've implemented a meeting, a progression meeting, to make sure there's management oversight of the carers that are progressing into full assessment, and that those decisions are right. Joss and her service can't just make those decisions. They have to work to national minimum fostering standards in making those decisions. We are going to investigate. So as part of defining children's services for the future, we are going to look into whether or not we are defining those national minimum standards too rigidly. So part of the work Joss referenced to, meeting with another local authority who is very good at recruitment. We've asked Bernardo's to support us because they've got a recruitment element as well. Joss is going to meet them with the Defining Children's Services team to look at whether or not we define those national minimum standards too narrowly, and if we do, how local authorities then manage the risk and support to foster carers who might have multiple complex issues. We do need to think about, even if they go through that assessment journey, the final decision isn't ours per se to approve them. So if we are too broad on our interpretation of those national minimum fostering standards, it is likely that the adoption panel, who is independent, and the agency decision maker, who is independent, would still not agree with approval. So we do have to get it right, and we can't make too many broad decisions about listing foster carers through our system who might have a number of complex issues, health or relationship or historical issues for them. So we're not confident at this point that we've got it right, hence why it's part of the Defining Children's Services for the Future programme. The one local authority in the region who has significantly higher numbers than us for recruitment is the local authority we've approached to mentor and support us on that, and Joss will be visiting to have that conversation.
Thank you. All right, Ted.
Yes, I mean that's encouraging. It's I mean, Leicestershire. When I first became a county councillor, one of the first things I noticed when I arrived the first time was the advertising for foster carers evenings. So the Leicestershire County Council cannot be at all accused of not making good effort to recruit foster carers, but of course you're always up against the facts and figures, and if someone was to read this report and think that statistic I've gave you, realistically I've got a 2% chance of passing the assessment, right, you have to wonder how many people would think, oh, I won't bother then, and which is a real shame given the amount of effort, A, the need, and B, the effort that so many people of good integrity like yourselves are putting in to do that.
I think in fairness, it's better to be safe than sorry. And a lot of these children that are going into foster care may have come from obviously difficult backgrounds or trauma or something. And the last thing you want is that after a few months, they have to move again, or there is a clash of personality. You know, we could have 100 foster carers, and we could have 10 children that don't suit any of them. And statistics in this case in recruitment can be very, very difficult. But at the end of the day, standards are standards and rules are rules. But sorry, Joss, you wanted to come in.
No, thank you. I was going to say a similar thing, and just in terms of that inquiry process, that is the piece of work that we'll be looking at. But again, we are in a competitive market, and people ring, and it may be that as Sharon spoke about earlier, it's about timings. We get a lot of people that will be ringing to find out because actually they're weighing up whether to go to Leicestershire or whether to go to an IFA. So that first point of inquiry, I think for us, some of the work that we need to do is what constitutes an inquiry. So it's a bit like, when's an inquiry, so that we can be clear about in terms of what are potential situations where maybe we need to review our gatekeeping, or whether it's somebody that actually really doesn't have any intention in becoming a carer and they're just kind of fact finding for themselves at this stage. So that will be some of the work that we'll be doing as well.
Thank you. I think also, particularly at this time, people haven't got a lot to do. Well, they have got a lot to do, but they're locked in their house or something. So websites become extremely attractive to certain people to check things out.
They have. Yeah, that's true.
And it might not be the thing that they really, really want to do. Fostering is not easy. It's a difficult thing to take on. So I don't see any more hands, but I'd like to thank you all very much for that. I found it an excellent report. We've had a very good discussion on it. So with that, we'll move on to item 11, which is the annual report of the IRO, the Independent Reviewing Officer. And this is something we receive annually and presents the extent to which the County Council has fulfilled its responsibilities to children in care and those subject to child protection planning. Now, I understand it's Sharon, you take the floor again, and you're joined this time with Kelda Clare. Welcome, Kelda. So I'll hand over to yourself.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And I'm just basically going to introduce the report and hand over to Kelda to take members through the key parts of the report. But as you've outlined, Chair, the purpose of the report is for the committee to have presented to them the annual report of the Independent Reviewing Officer. So in Leicestershire, that's in regard to children in care and those subject to child protection planning. So I'll hand over to Kelda and she'll ably take you through the report.
Thank you. It's clearly quite a detailed and lengthy report, so I'm not going to take you throughout it. So I will go through the executive summary and then questions from yourselves as you've read the report in totality. So in terms of the key messages within the report, the good and the positive elements that we've seen real progress on and maintained progress are highlighted within the timeliness of a number of areas. We've identified that timeliness, both in relation to our looked after population, so our reviews of arrangements are at 98.4%, and our timeliness for review child protection plans is at 93%, with initial child protection plans being at 95.2%. And these performance indicators are quite stable throughout the years, and we maintain a really good statistic against this, particularly in line with our statistical neighbours and national data. So that's a maintained and improving picture from year upon year. In terms of how we manage any drift and delay and those that aren't within timescales, we have service manager oversight of cases that are going out of timescales, and we follow up with audit work should we be seeing any trends or themes against those areas. We've seen an improvement in the timeliness of parents. IROs receiving the report before the day and parents before the initial child protection conference, and that currently stands at 79%. This continues to be an area that we are working on with our locality peers in ensuring that this is shared with families beforehand. Quite frequently, this can be a situation that has been shared, but the IRO hasn't had sight, and the IRO may see it on the day of conference. Primarily, social workers prioritise families and actually sharing that report with them, particularly in a face-to-face, because quite often it can be quite difficult information that they're sharing, with it being a child protection conference. And we are seeing this as an upward trajectory throughout our locality teams, which is really positive. I think within the safeguarding unit itself, we have seen some work upon improving the backlogs of IRO's records from review of arrangements records. This is the responsibility of the IRO to complete the record and upload that record to Mosaic. I've got a lot of feedback. I don't know whether it's me, so I apologise if other people have it. So in terms of that, so that we are getting the distribution and the sharing of the records out within 20 working days, and that's a much improving picture. IROs have also introduced the requirement to send out their decisions from a review of arrangement within 5 working days of the review. This gives the opportunity for the child social worker and the team manager of that case to look at those decisions of the IRO, challenge if necessary, or agree those decisions. Those decisions then form part of the care plan for that child, which will drive forward their care planning for that next 6 months until the next review of arrangement that the IRO will have oversight of. And we do have regular audit work against this within the safeguarding unit. So we're seeing improving pictures within changes that are happening within the safeguarding unit, which is a really positive position to be in. In terms of effective care planning, one of the areas that the safeguarding unit audits regularly is those cases that have been subject to a child protection plan over 18 months. Anything in terms of that is over a significant period of time will obviously evidence some level of drift and delay potentially, and that we're not effectively implementing the child protection plan to effect change for those children. What we are seeing is a consistent reduction of cases that are over a significant length of time, which for us, when we've then detailed those cases, we have ensured that there is oversight and discussions with the managers of those cases, and that reduction is showing that effective care planning and that driving of planning and ensuring that we are ending child protection plans as necessary, whether that's through an escalation route or whether that is enabling them to be on a child protection, a child in need plan, or support from early help. One of the areas that we're really proud of is our increasing participation of our children in their review of arrangement meetings. It is their meeting, so it's really, really crucial and central that our children partake in that meeting. There are some children that find this difficult, so when we talk of participation, this isn't always just a direct participation in the meeting itself, but it's ensuring that their voice has been represented, that they've had the opportunity to explore with the IRO, with their social worker, with a children's rights officer potentially, what they would like shared, that they understand their care plan, and if they have any questions that they want posed within the meeting, if they choose not to attend, that they can then do that. It's not within this report because this report is up to the end of March. But actually what we have seen with being virtual is since COVID has hit, since March, that some of our children actually really like the virtual way of doing things. So I'm really hopeful we'll actually see an increase in our participation through this year, because we've been trying to find very different ways of engaging our children in their meetings and actually learning from some of our children enjoying the use of their phones, the use of their tablets, which they're quite used to. And so that might be something that we'll see in our report for next year. One area for the IROs, and when I say IRO, I mean both the CP chair element and those that looked after children, is their quality assurance role. The IRO is in a really beneficial position. They are independent and have oversight of our children's care planning, the reports for the children, and the direction of travel of how we are keeping our children safe and being aspirational for our children and reaching those aspirations. So quality assurance is crucial for the IRO to both challenge where we're seeing gaps or deficits, and ensure that they time that is in place is minimized by challenging appropriately using our quality assurance escalation process, but also to highlight really positive and good work that our social workers are undertaking and sharing that, particularly with our practice excellence team and with teams themselves, to enable that learning from really good practice. So their quality assurance role is incredibly important. And what we have seen in this last year is an increasing number of quality assurance alerts, both for escalation of concern, but also for those where they have identified good practice, which are shared. And really for social workers, I think they enjoy the fact when their work is recognised and then shared upwards. Although we are seeing an improving picture in this, I have also included this in what needs to improve, because although we're seeing increased numbers, we recognise as leaders of that area that actually when we look at the work that needs to be done, the correlation between the numbers we're seeing isn't high enough. So that work is being done with IROs to fully incorporate their oversight, their quality assurance role across all elements for that child, and ensuring that that's represented on that child's case file, so that they understand that narrative of how things have been pushed for them and driven for them by their independent reviewing officer. And I think finally, and this has been a continuing picture for us within the safeguarding unit, is that increasing numbers of IROs and the recognition by our senior leaders of the need for that increasing number against our increasing population of children in care and our increasing child protection numbers. So I think that it's really important to highlight that I think the role of the IRO is fully recognised and supported by our senior leaders, and that is absolutely evidenced by the increasing numbers within our unit year upon year. We are seen very much as integral to the continuous improvement plan and the need for us to have that capacity to drive and move that forward. In terms of our worries, one of our primary concerns is against the increasing number of repeat plans. So this is a child that would have been subject to a child protection plan. That child protection plan has ended, but then within a period of time, and that's across time, this isn't just within a certain time frame, this is during their childhood, they then come back and are subject to a further child protection planning period. So for us, the concern is we haven't necessarily got it right at that first point of planning. Have we got the exit strategy right for that child? And has our support at a lower level for that child been appropriate and met their needs if they have then required a further period of child protection planning? So that's the collective element of why it worries us when we see this figure increasing. And we've seen a slow increase against this since October 2019. We are red against our target of which is 19%, and our final figure for 2019-20 was 21.6%. Still lower than our statistical neighbours, but not where we want to be. So in relation to that, what we have done is a high amount of quality assurance and audit work to understand what cases are coming back, why they are coming back, and linking this to our continuous improvement plan against our work with children in need, but also against the work that Sharon mentioned. And I think in one of the areas that she was talking in terms of the work that IROs are doing about their quality assurance role, their need to challenge, their need to ensure that all elements of a plan are completed at the point of it ending, and ensuring we have really robust safety plans in place for our children when we end a child protection plan. Which is right. Once we don't meet the threshold for child protection planning, they don't need to be subject to that level of plan. However, what we need to ensure is that families have a real network around that universal services are aware of what they should be doing, so their robustness against any plan once the child protection plan has ended. So that's certainly an area that we need to continue to be on top of, and we have been doing ongoing work against that measure throughout 2020, and that will keep going until we see that improving picture. And it's quite a holistic overview. As I've mentioned above, the impact of quality assurance, what we need to see is the IRO's numbers against their quality assurance alerts increasing, and I'd want to see that increasing against concern as much as for good practice. This isn't a one-sided position. We learn from good practice equally to that we learn from concerns. The IRO service have done a lot of work on language and engagement with our locality services, so that this is about joint ownership of ensuring planning is moved forward for our children and the best outcomes are received for our children. This isn't about the IROs trying to utilise a power as such. This is very much a case of working together to ensure we get the right outcomes in a timely manner for all of our children. One of the areas for our timeliness, which highlighted a concern, is timeliness of our the assessments being received 24 hours before a looked after review. Similarly to those that I said, which was an improving picture, which was against child protection planning, we don't have a concern that families aren't receiving these documentation and that they don't understand what the care planning and the assessments are. This primarily relates to the IRO not receiving it in time, which impacts on their planning for the meeting. So and that is important, and for the IRO to be very prepared and understanding the issues for the meeting so that they can share it in an appropriate way and get the best outcomes. But just to reassure that in terms of families receiving them, we are more assured against that, but we are continuing to highlight it and look at that and ensure that that's a way forward. Process developments, HSB, so that's harmful sexual behaviour, and we have a process within the safeguarding unit where we undertake reviews for our children that have been presenting such behaviours and they reach the threshold for a meeting. One of the areas that we need to develop, and we are developing and progress is being made, is against staff being trained to complete what is called the AIMS 3 assessment, which is the assessment of children who display harmful sexual behaviour, and it's the risk assessment, but it's very specialist. And ensuring we've got enough people trained so we don't have any delay in those assessments being completed as part of the review process of that HSB. And what you will have is an HSB meeting running alongside a review of arrangement meeting for any of our children that are looked after, but also running alongside any child protection plan as well. So they sit running alongside and they're very specific against the HSB behaviour from that child to prevent risk both to themselves and to others. So areas for improvement, we've discussed it. Repeat planning is one of our primary areas. Our QA alert process for the IROs to continue to increase the numbers, to continue to increase the understanding of the themes and trends and have actions against that to drive against our continuous improvement plan. I think one of the primary things for the IROs was when we had our Ofsted report, there's not one area that doesn't touch the IRO world. The IRO has oversight of everything. The IRO is that individual, that independent individual that should be driving each plan for our children and ensuring the quality is of a good standard as well. So against each element, the IRO touches it all. So we have that responsibility against the continuous improvement plan, very much so. Our role is central to pushing that forward. And I think one of the areas in terms of Tableau development, we have some requirements to have more reporting against the timeliness of the IROs uploading their reporting, the 5-day decision making, and also in terms of our QA assessments. So we haven't got a Tableau report against that as yet, but we have now got it onto Mosaic. So actually the systems are much more refined, less clunky of having Word documents and emails going backwards and forwards. So I'm really hopeful that the development within Mosaic and a Tableau report will enable us to understand the process better and develop and move forward. Social work reports to meetings. We will continue to work with our colleagues and do quality assurance alerts and HSB development, which I've discussed. So they're the areas that we will be moving forward on.
Thank you very much, Kelda. Right, I have 2 or 3 people that would like to talk. Mr. Welsh.
Thank you, Chairman. Thanks for the report, Kelda. I'm very happy with the content of the report. I think it looks pretty good. I was interested in your comment about the use of social media to talk to young service users. It's quite interesting how new ways of working can come out from the effect of lockdown. So I thought that was something certainly to explore later. The one thing, though, that did give me some concern And it's number 13, paragraph 13. I had thought we'd long talked about 18-month-long child protection plans, and I think we've discussed at length the reason why they're not good. But I had thought that we had ended them. So I was surprised to see that we've still some running. Is that something that we can end altogether, or is that just wishful thinking, Kilda?
I think it's very dependent on the individual cases, and that's why the audit work and the oversight is incredibly important. I don't think you would be able to end it necessarily. If you have a family, for instance, that have not been necessarily working or driving forward the child protection plan up to a 9-month, 10-month period, but then actually start to engage and you're seeing improvements, but it hasn't reached the threshold for them to come off. As long as you're seeing a driving forward position against that child protection plan, the time frame of it is not necessarily as important. I think the most concerning are those that have extended periods of time subject to a child protection plan, but the concerns still remain and you're not seeing an improving picture.
Okay, yeah, thanks, Kilda.
Mrs. Wright.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, first of all, for clarifying the situation regarding the reviews. That was one of my main questions, and you did that beautifully. Thank you very much. And also you did touch on the quality assurance and the alerts and the fact that it's moving to Mosaic. I just wondered if you could just explain that part to me, because I just don't understand what will happen and how that will actually function.
No problem. I mean, up to this point, the way our alert systems have worked is the IRO would identify a concern or good practice. They would then complete a Word document and email that Word document to the team manager and the social worker. For a good alert, we don't expect a response. For one of escalation, the team manager would then need to respond back. Now, against the child's file, we held all of that information just in the case recording. So we'd put it in there so you could see when one had been done, but it was quite cumbersome in that the whole process was only within the case record. What has been created is an actual step so that the IRO can create the step, send an alert to the manager. The manager then will respond. The IRO will make the decision whether that resolves that concern or whether it needs escalating further. And the step captures every step within it. So when we have the Tableau reporting against it, it will be much more robust in being able to give us, number one, which IROs are doing the most QA alerts. Number two, what themes they are against. Is there a pattern of it being against a certain worker, a certain manager, and how many are escalated? Because we were originally trying to capture that within a spreadsheet, and we weren't capturing the real detail that we required to report on. So we did report on it, but it wasn't as refined as we will be able to do what now it's in Mosaic.
Brilliant, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Parton.
Marvellous. Having actually attended a conference in 2018, it's fascinating to see this report. I'm actually looking at page 125 with the conference performance, because obviously where you say there's 877 CPCs, that's 761 that actually took place, but the expression is 13.2% have been problematic, and the some of the reasons for them going out of date or having to be stood down are one or two are would create questions, like, for example, on 10 occasions a social worker, okay, if they were ill, but then it could be said that maybe their line manager could attend or did not attend conference. 12 have got an unknown reason. 9, we've got no clerk or IRO available. And there's one or two unfortunate ones, including the two gas leaks. But in terms of the fact that we have now got a 4.7% increase, how much can we do to rectify the problems, like, for example, the social worker not attending, or these unknown reasons being worked out what's actually happened? Because having attended one of these meetings, there's a lot of effort goes in, and for 12 to be cancelled for some reason that we're unaware of.
And I appreciate that, Mr. But I mean, any conference that has to be rearranged or postponed due to unforeseen circumstances is not what we want. You know, as we said at the beginning, it's one of our maintained good statistical performances against statistical neighbours, etc., and it's a maintained position for us. But anyone that we have to cancel, we wouldn't like to. I do think that the increasing numbers of IROs within the unit, and there has been an increase in number of clerks as well, against a difficult position that we had back in last July. So that is an improving picture in terms of, for us, in ensuring that we can meet the requirements of all conferences, even with the increased number currently. We have 2 additional IROs joining us this month, in reflection of the increasing numbers of those subject to child protection conferences. There will be times where a social worker hasn't potentially attended. Maybe that's through sickness, maybe that's through unknown circumstances. They will be raised with senior managers to get an understanding of what that is. They wouldn't just be left and accepted. So all of those that you've spoken about are tracked on our report on a spreadsheet for us, and we will then have communications from service manager to service manager to get an understanding of what the rationale was behind it not going ahead.
Right, thank you very much, and thank you for the explanations. We have no more hands on this, so therefore I would like to thank everybody for their participation. It's been a good and frank discussion, and we now move on to the final report for this meeting, which is the Q2 2020-21 performance report. So Q2 takes us up to July, and therefore that's what this report is about. Sharon Cook, Paul Sumner, Assistant Director of Education and SEND, and Stuart Smith, the Service Development Business Partner, will present this item. So Sharon, are you starting, or are we going to Paula or Stuart?
Yeah, if I start, Chair, and go through, because many of the performance within my service area at the start of the report, so it probably makes sense for me to start and hand over to Paula, and Stuart, who has oversight of pulling this report together, can obviously, if there are any comments he wants to make at the end of that. The committee receive these reports on a regular basis. So as we've outlined in the report, the purpose for them and why we do them is well known to the committee, but it is there for members to read. As an overview, 20 measures that have been reported, 8 have improved in the period that we're reporting on. 3 show no significant change, and 5 show a decline. So, and there are some indicators that because of when their information is verified and reported on, they show no polarity for this period. 14 measures have a national benchmark. And for 3 of those, Leicestershire is performing in the top quartile, 6 are in the second quartile, 3 in the third, and 2 are in the fourth. And as recorded in this report, we do need to remember that the reporting of this is on a pre-COVID period. So we need to treat some of the information with the caution of next time it comes, it will be reporting on a period where we have been living and working through COVID-19. On the point 8 to 16 gives you the indicators about children live in safe, stable environments and have secure attachments. It outlines for members where we've seen particular progress and where we've seen, so there are issues around our child protection cases being reviewed in timescale. We're in the second quartile, but actually are performing in the 90s, mid to late 90s. So it just shows the level of performance there. Children subject to a child protection plan for a second or subsequent time. That is an area we've talked about earlier in this meeting. It's an area that's a real focus. We saw over a 2-3 year period a decline in that number. We have seen an increase, and we've been looking in great detail about what that's about, and tends to be around our families that are suffering from risks around parental mental health, substance misuse and domestic abuse. So, but we continue to do a lot of work in that area. Re-referrals to children's social care was a reduction in this quarter, so that moved us up in performance. And it goes on to talk about single assessments where we're performing particularly highly, and that has been a key focus of our continuous improvement. Our care leavers performance continues to be really high around care leavers in suitable accommodation, engaged in education, education, training and employment, and in contact with them. If we then move on in the areas, so helping children and their families build strength, resilience, confidence and capacity. There are the performance indicators from our children and family wellbeing service that goes through and talks about the number of children and families that the service is working with, and some of the key successes around performance that is in that area. And then section 26 to 29, people that are safe in their daily lives. So for this quarter, the youth offending statistics are usually reported in arrears because they need to be validated by legal bodies such as the police and the courts. So our figures for first-time entrants to the criminal system has decreased, which is positive. The rate of reoffending has decreased, and for this quarter we're reporting that there are no young people who were sentenced to custody, so they are really positive outcomes. We then in the report move on to the education and early years. So if I hand over to Paula, and then perhaps at the end, if there are any particular questions, take them at that point.
Thank you, Sharon. I'll pick up on paragraph 30, which is on page 147, just around early years and the percentage of eligible 2 and 3 year olds taking up their free entitlement. As you'll know, that's reported termly. We have seen a decline during this period of the take up, particularly of 3-year-olds. 2-year-olds, but what we do know is that there has been affected by COVID-19 disruption, which in some cases has meant that the newly eligible children were unable to begin their placement, and also some parents were choosing to keep their children at home. Some reasons for that are around not being able to visit premises, etc., and visit settings. And during some of the capacity challenges that the early years providers were faced with, the key worker children were given a priority. Sharon and I have also had some discussions across our two areas around some of the more vulnerable children that we have identified during the COVID period, who aren't taking up their free entitlement, and particularly for those who have for example, have a social worker. So we've put in place some processes in order to identify who those children are, so that in addition to the early years service encouraging take up, children's social workers are picking that up as well. And just in terms of the good quality education to ensure maximum potential for children, as you'll be aware, during this period there have been no formal school inspections. There have been a number of visits to schools, but they haven't taken the form of a formal inspection, and they are looking to resume those later on in the academic year when it's safe to do so, to provide support for those schools. But equally, they won't be graded. There won't be a graded judgment of those schools. Equally, you'll be aware that all of the examinations and assessments were cancelled in the 2020 academic year. So the data that the DFE will publish in the future, we'll obviously share back with the committee. What members of the committee will probably also be aware of, and is highlighted in the report, is the number of children that are electively home educated has increased. Sorry, but the 718 at the end of Q2. It was slightly lower than reported in Q1, but we are seeing an increase during the COVID period. That we will obviously continue to monitor and report, and the service is working very closely with families to provide the appropriate support and to encourage attendance at school where it's most appropriate. And as you'll see as well on page 147, where we've talked more broadly about NEET, so this isn't necessarily children who are open to social care. The figure is around 2.9%, and that's equates to about 380 young people. This is an increase of 9 young people compared to Q1, but it is consistent with increases amongst statistical neighbours across the country. So that's the kind of education and early years update of performance, and obviously happy to take questions.
Thank you very much. Mr. Parton.
I had a question. I hope I've got the right section. It was mainly for clarification, please. It's page 150. Help with children and their families build strength, resilience, confidence, and capacity. It was the you have the first statistic is number of individuals worked with. The second statistic is number of families. So obviously first is 3855, second figure is 1395. To what extent do those two overlap? Because obviously if you've got children, but then you've got families, obviously they are the children of the families, are they, presumably?
Yeah, sorry, I'll answer that. Yeah, they are. So it would be they are the families of the children that we work with, but we can, because of the very nature of the types of intervention and services that are provided within children and family wellbeing, the focus of that work could be very much on an individual, or it could be very much on a family basis. But yes, they are the individuals, but they are the number of families that the service would work with.
Sorry, Mr. Kaufman.
Thank you, Chair. I do apologise if the question I ask has been covered, but in the middle of the presentation, my computer ran out of steam and I had to go and get it plugged in. I asked this question yesterday at the members' briefing, and it's regarding the number of parents that are unwilling to send their children to school because somebody in the household is vulnerable, and they're concerned that the children that attend the school may bring home COVID. And I'm just wondering if at some stage the Education Authority will have some figures to that. I think I may have just plugged in when you were talking about school attendances, but I think there should be some difference here and some recording of the fact that there are parents that are seriously concerned because they're shielding of a problem that we brought home. Are we measuring this? Are we following this? Are we making sure that parents are not being persecuted because the government made a decision that all children should attend school regardless?
Jane, I see your hand is up. Did you
yes,
come in
Chair,
on that?
thank you. I'll pick this up quickly. Yes, Mr. Kaufman, as we said yesterday, we can do two things. One is that we can have a look to understand how many children we're talking about whose parents are so concerned about COVID that they're not sending them back. But as I set out yesterday, what we know within our schools is that all cases are being dealt with on an individual basis. So where children aren't in school, schools are working with those children to either support them to get into school or indeed provide work that enables them to, kind of work safely from home. But we will work with the education section of the department just to understand how many children that does affect.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I think we're coming to the end now. I'd like to thank everybody very much indeed for...
Mrs. Farrow, I think Mr. Welsh had his hand up.
Oh, did he? I haven't seen that. Mr. Welsh?
No,
it wasn't.
No, I've not raised it.
No, I'm making a list, Gemma, as I go along. I didn't see Mr.
I saw his hand up on my screen. Sorry.
That's all right. No problem at all. But I'd like to thank you all very much, all the officers and all the members of the committee. I'd like to thank Ian for standing in for Mr. Osborne, but I would also, and I give this both to all of you officers, Jane, Sharon, Paul, all of you, please take our really sincere thanks and appreciation to all your staff. We can't write to you all individually. We'd like to thank you so much for all the work during these very trying times. 9 months ago, 10 months ago, we never thought we'd all be in the same position and have gone through such things. Yes, lessons have been learnt, new methods of learning, and as been highlighted today, for some of our young people, they'd probably be much rather sitting in a computer with faces in front of them rather than having it face to face physically. Whereas for us, a lot of us, we'd rather be in County Hall, being able to walk around and have a chat with you, and not just quite so formal as it is now for due reason. But we do appreciate it, and I know I should be saying it, but it's a bit early for me because I never say Happy Christmas until after my birthday, which is at the end of this month. But I do wish you all, and let us hope, because we won't all be together until January, that 2021 will not go down in memory, in history, so much as 2020 will. In many years to come, children will be learning about 2020 in school lessons. So thank you very much indeed. Our next meeting, January the 19th. So take care, look after yourselves, and see you all soon.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair.
Bye.
Bye.